His face was just inches from mine. We stood frozen in the narrow hallway outside the guest bathroom, barely a breath apart, the distant hum of the lawnmower outside the only sound between us. The air smelled like citrus and steam. My hair was still damp. He didn't move. I didn't move. Neither of us said a word. The tension between us crackled like static in a thunderstorm. I don't know how long we stood there like that, 5 seconds, 10, but time stretched, warped, twisted into something unrecognizable. If anyone had seen us in that moment, everything would have come crashing down. Then the door at the end of the hallway creaked open. My heart stopped. Footsteps. A voice. Hey. Did someone move my phone charger? We jumped apart. Too fast. Too guilty. Too late. Before I begin the story and tell you how everything really happened, answer this question. Do you agree that everyone deserves a second chance after cheating? 7 years of marriage can slip into a rhythm you don't even notice until you wake up one day and realize you're no longer in it, you're just dancing along to someone else's beat. That's how I felt the morning his nephew arrived. We were prepping for the annual 4th of July cookout, and my husband was panicking about propane. I was elbows deep in a bowl of coleslaw when I heard the doorbell. "Can you get that?" he yelled from the garage. I wiped my hands and opened the door. He stood there with a backpack slung over one shoulder and a duffel bag at his feet. The same boy I remembered from years ago, but not a boy anymore. Taller, leaner, older, but with that same quiet confidence that always seemed just a hair too bold for his age. He smiled like he knew I'd be surprised. "I'm early," he said. He was early. A day early, in fact. My husband had invited him to stay with us for the summer while he figured things out post-graduation. I didn't know what things meant, but I wasn't asked. That's how it always worked between us. I didn't ask, and he didn't explain. He brought his bags in and followed me to the kitchen. "You still make that honey mustard chicken?" he asked. I blinked. "You remember that?" He shrugged. "Hard to forget." By the time my husband emerged, the three of us were sitting at the kitchen island, talking about gas prices and airline delays and how hot it was in Arizona. It was all casual, all harmless. But even then, somewhere in the way he looked at me, or how I caught myself looking back, I felt a ripple. I pushed it down. Later, while my husband cleaned the grill and I brought out the sides, the nephew stayed behind in the kitchen. I could see him through the window, leaning against the counter, sipping sweet tea like he had lived here all his life. And in a way, maybe he had. He spent summers with us as a teenager. I remembered him in braces. I remembered teaching him how to bake banana bread. And now he was here, taller than my husband, with a deeper voice and a habit of holding eye contact longer than necessary. That night, my husband fell asleep on the couch with a beer in hand and reruns of Wheel of Fortune playing too loud. I went outside to get some air. The patio was quiet except for the cicadas. I sat in the dark with my legs tucked under me, sipping the last of the rose. He stepped outside a few minutes later. No shoes. No phone. Just him. "Too hot to sleep?" I asked. "Something like that." We sat in silence for a long while. It wasn't uncomfortable. It just was. Eventually, he looked over at me. "You happy?" he asked, out of nowhere. I turned to him. "What?" He shrugged. "You just seem—" "I don't know." "Somewhere else." I didn't answer. Because what could I say? The next morning, I was already running late for a dentist appointment when I realized I left my moisturizer in the downstairs bathroom. I dashed in, half-dressed, towel slung over my shoulder. As I reached for the cabinet, the door opened. He stepped in. I froze. He froze. His eyes widened, then he turned around fast. Sorry, I didn't know you were in here. The door closed. I stood there, pulse hammering, staring at the fogged-up mirror. My face was flushed. For the rest of the day, we barely spoke. But I noticed things. Like how he moved around me in the kitchen, carefully, like he didn't trust himself. Or how he waited until my husband was out back mowing before he came downstairs. Or how he left his bedroom door open just a little too long when he changed. That weekend, my husband took us both to a neighborhood cookout. Everyone was laughing and drinking and playing cornhole. I forced smiles. I poured drinks. He kept his distance. But his eyes kept finding mine. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was imagining it. Until I caught him watching me fold laundry in the living room 2 nights later. Not staring, watching. Observing. Like I was a movie he couldn't stop watching. And I let him. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was 1,000 things I didn't have words for. Sunday night, I cooked dinner while my husband worked late. He texted saying he'd be home after 9. I poured 2 glasses of wine. Do you want to watch something? I asked, pointing at the remote. He nodded. We settled in. Not too close. Not too far. I asked about his plans, what came next for him. He talked about grad school. Boston. Maybe Seattle. I nodded. We were both talking, but neither of us was really listening. Around 10, the back door opened. My husband came in, kicked off his shoes, and grunted a greeting. I got up to clear the plates. He followed me to the kitchen. Thanks for dinner, he said. I turned. You're welcome. Then he said, you're different this week. I blinked. What do you mean? He shook his head. Don't know. Just feels like something's off. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, while putting away groceries, I found a receipt tucked under the coffee maker. A receipt from a gas station 2 towns over, with my name on it. I didn't remember leaving it there. I didn't even remember stopping there. I stared at it for a long time. Later that afternoon, while my husband was out, I went to throw it away. But the trash can was full. As I lifted the bag out, something slipped down the side, barely visible between the lining and the metal. A folded square of paper. I pulled it out. It was a receipt. From a roadside motel. My name. My card. Only, I'd never been there. But I recognized the timestamp. It was from the night of the cookout. And I wasn't the one who checked in. The receipt stayed in my hand long after I'd finished reading it. I must have stood by the trash can for a full minute, just staring. I couldn't understand how it got there. The date. The time. The place. All of it lined up with the night of the cookout. But I hadn't been to that motel. I hadn't even left the house that evening. The only other person who could have used my card was standing upstairs, probably scrolling his phone like nothing happened. I stuffed the receipt into the pocket of my jeans and walked out onto the porch. The summer heat was still thick, even as the sun dipped below the trees. I needed air. I needed to think. Instead, I sat on the porch swing and rocked back and forth with my hands clenched tightly around the receipt. He came outside 5 minutes later, barefoot, carrying 2 cold bottles of water. You okay? He asked, holding one out to me. I took it. I didn't answer. The silence between us said enough. He leaned against the porch rail and looked out over the yard. The cicadas had started again. His hair caught the last of the light. I didn't look at him. Not fully. But I didn't move away either. He spoke again. You look like you're somewhere else. I finally turned my head. You ever borrow someone's card without asking? His eyes flickered, just for a second. No. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. I stood and walked back inside. The next morning, I made breakfast like nothing had happened. My husband left early for work, barely speaking. I think he sensed the shift but didn't want to name it. I didn't either. Not yet. He came downstairs late, shirtless, rubbing his eyes like a boy still waking up. I handed him coffee without a word. We ate in silence. He scrolled his phone, and I watched him from behind my mug, wondering what he'd done that night. And with whom. That afternoon, I asked him to help me clean out the garage. It was a half-lie, we'd talked about doing it for months. He agreed too quickly, like he knew I needed the distraction. We worked side by side, pulling down old holiday boxes, sorting broken tools, dust swirling everywhere. The heat pressed in through the open doors, thick and heavy. I could feel sweat running down my back. I could feel him watching me. Every time I turned, he looked away too fast. His silence was louder than any conversation. At one point, I dropped a box of tangled Christmas lights. He bent down to help. Our hands touched. We both froze. The silence cracked. We didn't say a word. Later, we went to get paint. A stupid excuse, but I needed space. I told myself it was just about the color for the guest room. Something neutral. Something soft. We drove to the hardware store with the windows down and the radio low. He made a joke about how I always pick the most boring shades. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. We walked the aisles like strangers. Side by side, but not touching. Not talking. I could feel him near me. Every time he reached past me, every time his arm brushed close, I felt it. On the drive home, he stared out the window and said nothing. That night, my husband stayed late at work again. Said there was some emergency at the plant. I knew better than to ask. I didn't care anymore. He was on the back porch, pacing. I stepped outside and leaned on the railing beside him. You remember that summer we built the birdhouse? He asked. I blinked. You were 12. 13, he corrected. You let me paint it green. I laughed under my breath. It was ugly. He smiled. You told me it was perfect. We stood in silence for a while. I used your card, he said quietly. I didn't move. I didn't mean to. I didn't think it would matter. It does, I said. He nodded. I know. I looked at him then. Really looked. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The tension between us wasn't just tension anymore. It was history. Memory. Possibility. We kissed. The next day, I woke up early. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I wandered into the kitchen and made coffee, trying not to think too hard. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, dentist appointment at 11. I canceled it without thinking. He walked in around 9, dressed, hair damp from the shower. We need milk, I said. He nodded, grabbed the keys. An hour later, we were in the car, halfway to the grocery store, when I said, we should talk about what happened. He kept his eyes on the road. I know. Neither of us said anything else. At the store, we moved like a unit. Milk, eggs, fruit. No eye contact. No conversation. But everything was louder somehow, every sound, every glance from strangers, every accidental brush of his arm against mine. As we loaded bags into the car, I heard my name. I turned. It was my neighbor. The one with the yappy dog and the garden gnome collection. She waved too enthusiastically, sunglasses perched on her nose. "You out shopping with your nephew?" she asked. He paused. I smiled quickly. "Just grabbing a few things." She looked at us a beat too long. "Nice to see you too." We drove home in silence. Back at the house, my husband's truck was gone. He was supposed to be home by now. I went inside, dropped the bags, checked my phone. No messages. Then I heard a beep. From the laundry room. I followed the sound. His iPad. Unlocked. On the screen, an open conversation. Messages. Dozens. But not from me. From her. Her name wasn't familiar. But the words were. "Last night was worth it. Next time, bring your own toothbrush, winky face." And one more, time-stamped 15 minutes ago. "Still thinking about your hands on me." My hands trembled as I clicked through the thread. Photos. Conversations. All while he'd been pretending to work late. All while I had been blaming myself. And then I heard the door. Keys. Heavy steps. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I stood in the laundry room with his iPad in my hands as he walked into the house like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just blown our marriage to pieces. When he saw me standing there, something in his face changed. But I spoke first. "You left your iPad unlocked." He didn't speak. Not right away. He stood in the doorway, the keys still dangling from his fingers, staring at the iPad in my hands as if it might spontaneously vanish. His jaw tightened. His chest rose once, then fell sharply. For a moment, I thought he'd deny it. Tell me it was some mistake, some old message, a joke, a misunderstanding. I was ready for the lies. I had prepared myself for them, rehearsed the responses in my head. But instead, he set the keys down gently on the dryer and said nothing. Nothing. That silence told me everything. I walked past him, out of the laundry room, down the hall, into the kitchen. My hands were trembling. Not from heartbreak. From rage. From clarity. The kind of clarity that comes only after you stop pretending. I poured myself a glass of water but didn't drink it. I just held it. He followed after a minute. His steps were slower now. Careful. "I guess I'm not the only one," I said. His eyes lifted. "What do you mean?" I shook my head and laughed, sharp and humorless. "Don't insult me." He rubbed the back of his neck, said something under his breath, then louder, "It didn't mean anything." I looked him dead in the eyes. "That's what makes it worse." He didn't respond. The kitchen filled with the tick of the wall clock and the hum of the refrigerator. I couldn't remember the last time we'd stood in this room and looked at each other like people who shared a life, a home, a bed. Now we were just two ghosts occupying the same space. He scratched at the label of his water bottle. I watched him, numb. Eventually, he turned to leave. I stood in place for a full minute before I moved. Then, I went upstairs, shut the bedroom door behind me, and sat on the edge of the bed. My suitcase was under the bed, collecting dust. I pulled it out but didn't open it. I just stared at it. I had no plan. No destination. I didn't even know if I wanted to leave or if I wanted him to. An hour passed. Maybe more. I heard the front door open and close. I didn't go downstairs. I didn't care where he went. All I knew was that I couldn't breathe in that house with him anymore. Later that evening, I found myself back in the garage. I needed something to do with my hands. I rearranged a pile of boxes that didn't need rearranging. I pulled out an old set of paint cans and wiped them down, one by one. I turned on the radio just to fill the air with something besides my thoughts. Static gave way to an old Fleetwood Mac song, and I almost laughed. The lyrics were too on the nose. Too cruel. The side door opened. It was him. Not my husband. He walked in, eyes scanning the room, then landing on me. I froze. "I saw his truck wasn't here," he said quietly. I nodded, slowly. "He's gone." He took a few steps closer. "Are you okay?" I didn't answer right away. I wasn't. And yet, I'd never felt more grounded. More lucid. I looked at him, really looked, and something in me collapsed, not from weakness, but from the unbearable weight of pretending. We kissed. I don't know how long we stood there afterward. Minutes. Hours. Time had become slippery again. We eventually went inside. He followed me into the living room, where I collapsed onto the couch. He sat in the armchair, hands clasped between his knees. The tension between us hadn't dissipated. It had deepened, thickened. But this wasn't about attraction anymore. This was something else. Something heavier. He was the first to speak. "Are you leaving him?" I blinked. "I don't know." He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that. There was something about his stillness that unnerved me. Like he was bracing for impact. I asked, "Did you ever think this would happen? Us?" He stared at the carpet. "No. Neither did I." The door slammed open. I jolted upright. My husband stood in the entryway, eyes flicking between us. His expression unreadable. I expected yelling. Accusations. Something violent or wild. But he didn't move. Didn't say a word. He stepped forward, dropped something on the table. It was the spare key to the house. Then he looked at me. "I won't sleep here tonight." I opened my mouth to say something, but he raised a hand. "Don't. I'm not in the mood to hear lies." He turned and walked out the front door. The silence afterward was louder than anything that had come before it. He stood up and went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, then paced slowly back to the living room. I stayed frozen on the couch. Then I whispered, "What now?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over, crouched beside me, and said, "You can't undo any of this." I nodded. And in my heart, I knew he was right. The damage wasn't new. We'd just stopped hiding it. The next morning began with a silence so thick, it felt like the walls had absorbed every word we hadn't said the night before. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker, listening to it gurgle as if that sound alone could fill the gaping hole in my chest. The key my husband had left still sat on the living room table, untouched. He hadn't come home. I didn't ask where he went. I didn't need to. He didn't need a bed in this house anymore. I took my coffee outside to the back steps. The air was already heavy with humidity, the sky bleached and gray. Storms were expected by afternoon, but the thunderclouds inside me had already rolled in. Somewhere beyond the trees, a lawnmower started. Life was going on. It always did. Behind me, the screen door creaked. I didn't turn. He sat down beside me, not too close, not too far. We sat like that for a while, two people who shared something they couldn't name anymore. Something broken. Something irreversible. Neither of us had slept. I could tell by the way his eyes were rimmed red, the way his jaw clenched even when he was still. His hand rested on his knee, fingers twitching like they were rehearsing a gesture he wasn't ready to make. Eventually, he stood. I followed him back inside without a word. That day blurred into motion. We didn't speak about what had happened. We didn't speak about what hadn't. Instead, we moved through the house like shadows. I vacuumed rooms that didn't need vacuuming. He took the trash out, twice. I scrubbed the bathroom sink until my fingers wrinkled. Midday, the sky cracked open. Rain pounded the roof like punishment. The house felt smaller in the storm, like the walls were closing in. I sat in the laundry room, folding clothes I didn't remember washing. I didn't hear him come in until he sat on the dryer across from me. He held a folder in his hand. I looked at it, then at him. "It's from him," he said quietly. I froze. My throat dried up. "What?" "My uncle," he added. "He left it on the porch this morning." I took the folder with slow hands, already dreading what was inside. The paper inside was thick, legal-sized. At the top, in bold, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." I didn't feel anything at first. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a strange numbness that spread through my chest like fog. There was a handwritten note clipped to the front. "I won't stand in your way. I just want this done quietly." That was it. No emotion. No explanation. No goodbye. He watched my face, waiting for a reaction I couldn't give. After a moment, I said, "He really did it." He nodded. I placed the folder on the washing machine and walked to the kitchen. I didn't need water. I didn't need food. I just needed to be somewhere else. He followed again, slower this time. "Careful." "I'll leave," he said softly. The words hit me harder than I expected. I shook my head, not because I disagreed, but because I didn't know what else to do. "Maybe you should." He nodded. "It's for the best." I didn't stop him. By evening, his bags were packed. The guest room looked untouched again, as if none of it had happened. As if the past few weeks had been imagined. He stood at the front door, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes searching my face for something final. A word. A sign. Anything. I gave him nothing. He stepped outside. I closed the door behind him. The silence after he left was different than before. It wasn't thick or suffocating, it was hollow. Echoing. The kind of silence that fills empty spaces where something used to be. I stayed up late, wandering the house like a ghost. I found myself standing in front of the fridge at midnight, staring at the same carton of eggs I'd ignored all week. I opened it. One was cracked. I threw the whole thing out. By morning, I had made a decision. I called a realtor. Told her I was thinking of listing. She said she'd stop by tomorrow to walk through the place. I told her it was nothing urgent. Then I packed a small overnight bag. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. I drove without a destination, passing the same gas station where my card had been used, the same side road that led to that motel. I kept going. 3 towns over, I found a little diner with peeling paint and a neon sign that flickered. I ordered coffee. I didn't drink it. I sat by the window, watching cars pass. Each one a life, a story, a direction. I felt outside of all of them. The waitress asked if I needed anything else. I said no. As I stood to leave, I heard a voice behind me. "Didn't expect to see you here." I turned. It was him. Not him. My husband. He looked as surprised as I felt. He was seated in a booth, alone. A half-empty plate of pancakes in front of him. A worn newspaper to the side. His eyes met mine like he was waiting for me to say something first. But I couldn't. He gestured to the seat across from him. I sat. We didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "You know what's funny? I came here to be alone." I looked out the window. So did I. He studied me. Is it strange I'm not angry? I didn't respond. He continued, "I think I was gone long before you realized it. That doesn't make what you did okay. But it makes it make sense." I turned to face him. So what now? He sighed, looked down at his coffee, and said, "I signed the papers." I swallowed hard. "But I haven't filed them yet," he added. I stared at him. His next words came like a blow. "I wanted to see if you would." I didn't speak. Couldn't. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the folder, and slid it across the table. And just like that, he stood and left. I sat in the booth alone, the folder before me, the rain tapping gently against the window, the waitress pouring coffee 2 tables down, the world still spinning. And all I could do was stare at that folder and wonder. Was I ready to sign it? Or was I still waiting for something, or someone, who was already gone? I didn't open the folder. Not at the diner. Not in the car. Not even when I got back home and placed it on the kitchen counter next to the fruit bowl no one ever touched. It sat there for hours while I moved through the house like a stranger, each room colder than I remembered. Every framed photo on the wall stared back at me with a kind of quiet judgment. I thought about flipping them all face down. Instead, I packed. Not much. Just the essentials. A week's worth of clothes, a small bag of toiletries, chargers, my passport, even though I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't want to leave permanently. I didn't even know if I wanted to leave at all. But I needed distance. Something to push against. When the realtor showed up the next morning, I answered the door in the middle of taping up a cardboard box. She walked through the house with wide, approving eyes, complimenting the natural light, the hardwood floors, the updated bathroom. I followed her silently, nodding at the right times, answering her questions without real thought. I wasn't trying to impress her. I just wanted to feel what it would be like to not live here. By noon, she was gone, and the house was quiet again. That's when the knock came. I thought it might be her returning, maybe she forgot something. But when I opened the door, it wasn't the realtor. It was her. I didn't recognize her at first. Only the eyes gave her away, sharp, bright, a shade of green that didn't look real in daylight. She was younger than I expected. Pretty. Dressed like she belonged in a different part of town. Polished. Lipstick perfect. "Hi," she said. I blinked. "Can I help you?" She hesitated. I wasn't sure if I should come. But I needed to. I stared at her. Something in my gut twisted. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at me. "Can I come in?" I didn't move for a second. Then I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, eyes scanning the space like she already knew it. I closed the door behind her, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt. I didn't offer her a seat. She stood in the middle of the living room, clutching her purse with both hands like it was a shield. "This is strange." "I know it is. But I thought you deserved to hear it from me." I said nothing. She took a breath. "It wasn't just once. With him. Your husband." The words didn't land like a bomb. More like a dull thud. An echo of something I'd already known. "I figured," I said. She swallowed. "It started months ago." Before he invited me to that motel. Before the messages. I thought it was just a fling. He made it sound like things were over between you two. That you were just living in the same house, nothing more. I raised an eyebrow. And you believe that? She looked down. I did. There was something so human in her shame that I couldn't even muster anger. I'm not here to cause more problems, she said. I just wanted to tell you that he wasn't honest. Not with me. And probably not with you either. I crossed my arms. Why now? She hesitated again. Because he asked me to move in. I blinked. And I said no. My arms dropped to my sides. I told him he needed to clean up the mess he made first. And I wasn't going to be part of it. Not anymore. I leaned back against the edge of the couch. So this is guilt? No, she said quickly. Well, maybe partly. But also, self-preservation. She pulled something from her purse. A small envelope. She placed it on the coffee table. I don't know what you'll do with it. But it's all the messages. Printed out. Just in case he tries to rewrite the story. I didn't touch the envelope. She nodded once, then stepped toward the door. Before leaving, she paused. You deserve better. From both of us. And then she was gone. I stood in the living room for a long time, unmoving. The envelope sat like a live wire on the table. I couldn't bring myself to open it. When I finally did, hours later, I didn't even read the words. I just flipped through the pages, one by one, like I was thumbing through someone else's life. Each message printed in black ink, like a record of all the ways someone could lie to your face and still kiss you goodnight. I stuffed the papers back inside the envelope and shoved it into a drawer. The sun was setting when I heard tires on gravel. I stepped to the window, heart suddenly racing without permission. It wasn't him. It was his nephew. He stepped out of the car slowly, unsure if he should even walk to the door. I opened it before he could decide. He looked at me, then glanced over my shoulder, like expecting someone else to appear. I heard, he said. About the papers. The diner. All of it. I didn't speak. I didn't come to fix anything, he added. I didn't want to disappear without saying something. I nodded. That's fair. He hesitated, then said, Do you hate me? No, I answered honestly. I think I hate me more. He exhaled, long and quiet. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, Do you want to leave? I stared at him. He gestured toward the car. Just drive. For a day. No destination. No one waiting. I didn't answer. But I stepped forward. We got in the car. We didn't speak for miles. Just drove with the windows cracked, letting in the wind and whatever came with it. At one point, we pulled over near a lake, empty except for one old wooden bench. We sat there, watching the water ripple, the sky fade into lavender. We didn't touch. We didn't kiss. We just sat in silence, two people neither beginning nor ending something, just floating in the middle. And then my phone buzzed. A message. From my husband. 5 words. I filed. You're free now. I stared at the screen. Then I looked at the man beside me. And for the first time since everything started, I had no idea what I wanted next. We sat in the car for what felt like hours after the message came through. Neither of us spoke. The lake ahead shimmered faintly, catching what little light was left in the sky. My phone screen had dimmed and gone dark, but the 5 words still burned into the back of my mind. I filed. You're free now. He didn't ask what it said. I didn't offer it. Eventually, I turned and looked at him. The quiet between us was no longer heavy. It wasn't tension or guilt. It wasn't even curiosity. It was something else entirely, something I couldn't name. I watched him breathe. I watched the way his fingers drummed once against his knee and stopped. I opened the car door and stepped out. Gravel shifted under my feet. The air smelled like pine and something faintly metallic, like the coming of rain. I heard his door open behind me, then close. His steps were slower now, almost unsure. I didn't wait for him. There was a bench by the lake, worn, crooked, its paint peeling. I sat. He stood a few feet away, watching the water with his hands in his jacket pockets. We didn't speak. After a while, he sat beside me. You didn't answer him, he said. I didn't know what to say. He nodded, eyes still on the lake. So, what now? I don't know. More silence. And then, without looking at me, he said, You don't have to figure it all out tonight. I know, I said quietly. But I can't pretend I didn't just lose everything I spent years building. His jaw tensed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I was thinking, he said slowly, about the day I got here. You answered the door in an apron, hair pulled back. You had flour on your wrist. I don't know why that stuck with me. Maybe because you looked like you were trying so hard to keep everything in order. I exhaled, a sharp laugh escaping. And I was failing. He smiled faintly. No. You looked like you were drowning. The truth hit harder than I expected. I looked down at my hands in my lap and suddenly hated how still they were. I used to think, I whispered, that if I just held on tight enough, everything would eventually feel right again. Like seasons. Like muscle memory. He turned to me then. Really turned. But it didn't. I shook my head. He leaned back. The boards under the bench creaked. You ever think about leaving all of it? He asked. I tilted my head. You mean life? Or just this zip code? Both. I didn't answer. Because honestly, I had. More than once. We stayed there until the sky fully darkened, until the crickets overtook the silence and the wind picked up. Eventually, we drove back into town. He didn't ask if I wanted to go back to the house, and I didn't offer a direction. When he finally pulled onto our street, my chest tightened. The lights in the house were off. No car in the driveway. It looked hollow. I stepped out slowly, unsure if I was supposed to go in or turn around and leave everything behind. He stayed in the car. I looked over my shoulder. He didn't wave. He didn't move. I turned and walked up the steps. Inside, the house smelled like dust and lavender. Familiar, but wrong. I dropped my bag by the door and stood in the foyer, listening. Nothing. The folder was still on the kitchen counter. I walked over and opened it this time, flipping to the signature page. Mine was the only line left blank. I closed it and went upstairs. The guest room door was open. Bed still made. His scent still faint in the air, fabric softener, pine, something I could never quite place. In my room, everything was where I left it. The curtains swayed from the ceiling fan's slow spin. On the nightstand, a photo of us from 4 years ago smiled back at me. I picked it up and stared. We looked happy. No, not happy. We looked comfortable. Like two people playing the part of love after the script had long been forgotten. I set the photo face down and crawled into bed fully dressed. I didn't sleep. At sunrise, I made coffee, pulled my hair into a bun, and left the house again. I needed air. I needed something real. I drove until the gas light blinked on. A small town upstate. Wooden shops with hand-painted signs. A coffee house named The Perch. I walked in. The barista looked about 19 and barely awake. I ordered something hot with cinnamon and sat at the back, away from the windows. Around me, the day began. Strangers laughed. A man kissed his wife's forehead while she stirred her tea. A teenager argued with her mom about shoes. The world continued. I sipped the coffee slowly, unsure what to do next. And then the bell above the door jingled. I didn't look up right away. But when I did, I froze. It was him. Not the nephew. My husband. He looked different. Not older. Not tired. Lighter. He spotted me instantly, as if he'd known I'd be here. I didn't move. Neither did he. Finally, he approached, a paper cup in his hand. I didn't expect you to run, he said. I didn't run. He smiled faintly. No. I guess not. He sat across from me. I let him. For a moment, we just watched each other. Then he pulled something from his coat pocket. A ring. Mine. He placed it on the table gently. I figured you might want it. Or not. I didn't reach for it. He stood. I won't bother you again. I just wanted to see you one more time. Before I go. I blinked. Go where? He gave a soft shrug. Seattle. Job offer. Fresh start. I stared at him. He nodded once. Then turned and walked out of the cafe. The bell above the door jingled. And just like that, he was gone. I stayed in the cafe long after he left. The ring sat on the table like a question mark I couldn't answer. I didn't touch it. I just watched the swirl of steam rising from my cup until it disappeared into the morning light. Seattle. He hadn't even asked if I wanted him to stay. Maybe that was the real answer. Maybe he knew. Or maybe he had finally stopped trying to fix something that had been broken for longer than either of us admitted. By the time I stepped back outside, the sun was high, and the parking lot buzzed with late shoppers and impatient honking. I got in my car, closed the door, and just sat. The silence was deafening, but at least it was mine. When I got home, the house felt colder. I expected that. What I didn't expect was the bag waiting inside the front door. His bag. Not my husband's. His nephew's. He was back. Or had never really left. The guest room door was cracked. I pushed it open slowly, expecting to find him asleep, or maybe pretending to be. But it was empty. Just the duffel bag on the floor and a note on the pillow. I picked it up. 4 words. I didn't want goodbye. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the paper still in my hand. Something inside me twisted, something between relief and regret, too tangled to name. He'd left. Again. And I didn't stop him. That night, the wind picked up. A storm rolled in. I opened the windows anyway. I wanted the house to breathe. I wanted something to move. The curtains danced like they remembered joy, and for a moment I sat still enough to imagine I wasn't here, that this wasn't my life. Morning came with heavy clouds. I poured coffee and stared at my packed bag in the hallway. I still hadn't unpacked. I wasn't sure I ever would. I needed out. Not for good. But long enough to remember who I had been before this house, before this marriage, before everything fell apart. I booked a cabin 2 hours north. A small one near the woods, with no Wi-Fi and no reception. The kind of place people went to forget. I told no one. I left the ring on the nightstand. I left the folder on the counter. I locked the door behind me and drove. The road out of town was unfamiliar, winding and cracked. But the further I got, the lighter I felt. At the cabin, the key was under the mat, just like the email said. The inside smelled of cedar and old fabric softener. A kettle. A record player. A single chair facing the window. It was perfect in the way broken things sometimes are. I didn't sleep the first night. The silence was too honest. The next morning, I hiked a trail that led to a small clearing, flat and green, with a view of the lake. I sat there for hours, doing nothing. Just breathing. Just remembering how to be in my own company without needing distraction. On the third day, I drove into the nearby town for groceries. A woman at the checkout asked if I was visiting. I nodded. She said, "You look like you've been through something." I didn't deny it. Back at the cabin, I made tea and watched the trees sway. And then, just before sunset, I heard a car. I stepped onto the porch. He was standing by the hood of a rental, hands in his pockets, hair a mess from the wind. Neither of us moved. "How did you find me?" I asked. He stepped closer. I didn't. I just drove. I narrowed my eyes. He pulled something from his jacket, my postcard. The one from the fridge back home. A photo of this cabin's lake view. "You always said this looked like peace," he said. "So I figured if you ever disappeared, this would be the place." I exhaled. He didn't ask if he could come in. He didn't step closer. He just stood there, waiting. After a long silence, I said, "You shouldn't be here." "I know. I needed space." "I know that, too." I looked down. "So why come?" "Because you didn't say goodbye either." I didn't answer. He walked to the porch steps but stopped short of climbing them. "I'm leaving the country," he said. "A friend offered me a spot on a project abroad. Months. Maybe longer." I looked up. He nodded. "I just wanted you to hear it from me." "Why?" I asked. He shrugged. "So it wouldn't feel like another open ending." And then he turned. Got in the car. And drove away. No kiss. No hug. Just the soft echo of gravel and fading taillights. I watched until the road swallowed him whole. Then I went back inside. Sat down in the quiet. And for the first time since all of it began, I cried. Not because he left, but because he didn't ask me to follow. I stayed in the cabin another day. Then another. I kept waiting for the silence to turn into something else, comfort, maybe, or clarity. But it didn't. It just stayed silent. Each morning, I made coffee and watched the lake, pretending not to notice the slow ache in my chest. I cleaned surfaces that weren't dirty, rearranged books on the shelf by color, then by height, then back again. I told myself I was healing, but it was more like hovering. Like floating above my own life, unsure how to step back into it. On the fifth day, I packed my things. There was no dramatic moment. No decisive realization. Just a quiet sense that I didn't belong there anymore. That the solitude had served its purpose, and now it was just turning into avoidance. I drove home in silence. No music, no stops, just highway and lines and trees that all blurred together. The closer I got to town, the tighter my stomach felt. Familiar streets. Familiar intersections. But they didn't feel like mine anymore. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same. The curtains were still drawn. The plants on the porch still half alive. The same quiet suburban stillness wrapped around everything like plastic. But there was a package on the doorstep. I hadn't ordered anything. I carried it inside, dropped my bags, and set the box on the kitchen table. No return address. No name. I opened it. Inside was a small photo album. I didn't recognize it at first. The leather was worn, the stitching frayed. But when I opened the cover, the first picture nearly stopped my heart. It was us. Me and my husband. Our first vacation, years ago. Colorado. I was wearing that horrible windbreaker I thought made me look adventurous, and he had his arm wrapped around my shoulders like he thought I might float away. We were smiling. I flipped the page. More photos, Thanksgiving, a road trip to Nashville, our old apartment balcony. Moments I had forgotten. Moments I'd tried to forget. Toward the end, the pictures changed. They were more recent. A birthday dinner I barely remembered. A backyard barbecue from 2 summers ago. Us, but not quite. The smiles looked forced. The space between us had grown. But the last page was blank. Just a sticky note, right in the center. It said, "You can fill the rest." I sat there for a long time. And then I cried again, but not for him. For the version of us I used to believe in. For the woman I was back then. For the years I'd spent holding together something that had already come undone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the house. I looked through drawers I hadn't opened in years. I found old receipts, cards, a playlist we once made together and never listened to again. At some point, I wandered into the guest room. His scent was gone now. The bed was made too neatly. The windows were shut tight. I sat on the edge of the bed, unsure why I was there. Then I heard it. The front door opening. I stood up fast, heart in my throat. Footsteps. Slow. Hesitant. I moved to the hallway. He was standing there. Not my husband. Him. He looked different, older, maybe, or just tired. His eyes met mine and didn't blink. "I thought you were gone for good," I said quietly. "I was," he replied. "I just couldn't make it stick." We didn't hug. We didn't move. "I left because I thought you needed space," he continued. I didn't expect it to feel like losing a limb. I crossed my arms, more to hold myself together than to push him away. "You said you were going abroad." I was. I still might. I nodded slowly. "And you came back because?" He looked at me like he was choosing every word carefully. "Because I realized I never asked what you wanted. I just kept making choices and hoping you'd follow." I stared at him, unsure how to respond. He stepped forward, then paused. "I don't need an answer tonight. I just needed you to know that wherever I go next, I don't want it to be without you." Something in my chest cracked. Not from pain, just release. "I don't know what I want either," I said. "I just know I don't want more lies." "No more lies," he said softly. We stood in the silence again, the house breathing around us. Then I asked, "Where are you staying?" "I haven't figured that out yet." A beat passed. "You can stay here," I said. "For now." He nodded once. Later that night, I lay awake in my bed, listening to the faint sound of movement downstairs. I didn't know if it was him pacing or just the old house settling. Either way, it felt different now. Like something had shifted, not healed, not solved, but shifted. And then, just as I was drifting off, the doorbell rang. I sat up, heart hammering. It was nearly midnight. I wrapped a blanket around myself and walked to the door. I peered through the side window. And froze. It was her. Not the same woman from before. Not the one my husband had been seeing. This was someone else. Younger. Different. She held a small suitcase. And when I opened the door, she spoke only 4 words. I think I'm pregnant.